Live.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Facebook land. I'm Marjorie Chen. I'm the Artistic Director of Theatre Passe Muraille.
And I'm Indrit Kasapi, and I'm the newly appointed Associate Artistic Director at Theatre Passe Muraille. Yay!
Yay! Look at us. Look at us. You know that meme?
Don't we look great?
You know that meme? Isn't that meme with Paul Rudd? Look at us.
Look at us.
Look at us. Do you think we'd be here?
Yeah.
I didn't. Like, do you know that meme? Anyway.
I'm sure some people do.
Come on, people don't know that meme. We're also joined from behind the camera with our marketing coordinator, Fatuma Adar. Adar, gotcha.
Hello.
She's waving. She'll join us in a little bit. We're just going to wait a little bit as people collect and gather onto this little chat.
Interweb.
The interweb as we gather digitally.
We have a fabulous backdrop back here.
I kind of feel like it's a castle. I don't know why. It's like Theatre Passe Muraille castle.
It's high tech.
It's high tech.
Natural lights.
So Indrit's actually, just to preface, Indrit's actually just started this week as Associate Artistic Director. And really, do you want to talk about just some of the areas that you'll be taking care of? Just to let people know the things that that you'll be dealing with here.
Sure,
yeah.
I'll be taking care of some of the Buzz events that we have going on here, which is the development series that happens at TPM, as well as the resident artists and the companies. I'll be supporting with the creators grants, which is why we're here today. There's also some responsibilities with an open door grant, which has
from the Toronto Arts
Council. Yay, Toronto Arts Council. We will be doing some accessibility labs. We've already started, and so we'll continue that work throughout the season. And there's a myriad of other outreach things, like question and answer periods after shows. There's preludes before shows, and probably other stuff as well. I feel like that's all I can remember from my list of things to do right now.
He basically started with like, okay, here's a list of things that you need to know. Okay.
I felt like this was a quiz. Like, it was just like, how much do you remember in terms of what you're supposed to be doing? I was like, oh my God.
Okay, good. How are we doing in terms of...
We're doing good. We have 9 people.
Great.
9 people.
We're gonna start. So
10.
10 people.
Just to talk through what we're going to talk through this about an hour. The first half, we'll just talk about grants themselves, kind of get specific into the Recommenders Grant from the OAC, and then the second half we'll talk a little bit more specifically about Theatre Passe Muraille stuff and TPM specific things. Just to start, if you're a first-time grant writer, I know it can be really intimidating. I think that's like a real big thing to kind of go, gosh, it's just all paper. What does it mean? That's boxes. And I know I have a slight reading disability. It can be very intimidating. But I really encourage you to really think about, this is a way, number one, I believe that anyone can do it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think anyone can do it. It just, you just have to work out the right way that it's going to work for you. And for me, I just really started to approaching my first time grants. It was like, it felt so overwhelming because there was things I didn't know yet. But it's a good chance for you as the artist to start to answer these questions and start to figure out your project. And you might feel like, oh, I don't know yet. It's like, okay, but make a decision for now and see where that takes you. And as you work on your grant, I guarantee you will know more about your project by the end of it. And you should think of that as like an empowering thing. You should think of that as like, oh, it gives me a chance to think about my project in a realistic way and a feasible way. And
I think that's what's great about it, because it forces you to actually articulate your thoughts around some idea that you might have. And it's really frustrating. It can be, and there's probably a lot of jargon, a lot of language, a lot of things that you don't understand or don't know. But the process of going through it is really beneficial, I think, for me. Yeah. It was certainly. I wrote my first grant when I was still in theater school, and it was really challenging. But we didn't get the grant, but we still did the project because we had figured out such a clear path. You know what I mean? Even though we had no idea. It was like our first time putting something on paper, writing it down. Yeah.
So I've written, I don't know how many grants, I don't know how many you've written, certainly Fatima behind the camera has written a lot. They've ranged from kind of grants like this, like the Recommenders Grant, which is anywhere from between $1,000 to $5,000 to, I've written grants for, $500,000. That's probably the biggest grant those are the biggest grants I've written.
Yeah.
So that is a wide range, but here fundamentally, every single grant proposal is asking these questions, okay?
That's right.
It's asking the questions of who, what, why, where, and how. And so if you really think, that sounds like, that seems obvious, but if you really think about that way you can break down any grant. You can see a very complex question about community engagement in your neighborhood. Like, what are they asking? What are they asking when they ask that question? Are they asking who? Are they asking why? Are they asking where? Are they asking how? I missed one.
What?
The important one. That's the really important
What is
one.
it?
That's the really important one. But that's basically, if you're looking at a grant and you're like, I don't know what the heck to say, think about that question and think if one of those 5 things, probably you can answer it. It's one aspect of one of those things. Okay? And so let's just do a little
sort of fun
version of that. Mock version of that.
Version.
Okay, so let's start with who? So say it's you, Indrit.
Yeah, and
hi,
we're writing a sort of made-up grant.
Yeah, it's a made-up grant. Okay, so So or say it's our grant. We're gonna do project. Say what's the project?
We're gonna do a musical.
Okay.
That's gonna it's gonna have an interdisciplinary
Great
thing where it's gonna be musical combined with what can.
And what's the what? What else is in the what there? So it's a musical. We know what that is.
But it's an interdisciplinary project, and so it's got another discipline.
Good. So here
we're working with a psychiatrist.
We're working with a psychiatrist.
Yes.
So I would say the other part of the what is what's the story or the narrative, right?
Yeah.
So we'll say, okay, it's a psychiatrist, multidisciplinary, they're losing their mind, and then actually you realize they were never a psychiatrist. So that's the story.
Yes, that's great.
This is our made up
I'm excited.
It's called
intrigued.
Psychiatrist, baby.
I'm intrigued.
Okay, so that's the what. So let's say that's our project that Indrit and I are somehow going to make, okay?
And we have a third collaborator.
Who is a psychiatrist. Okay, so let's move to another question. What's the next question? So who?
Who?
So maybe we answered that already.
So the personnel.
Yeah, so the personnel. So that might be in a larger project that's larger, might be also who are the other collaborators? Who are the singers? Who are the musicians? Are we composing the music? I don't know that we are.
I don't think so.
You might be choreographing.
Maybe,
Yeah,
yes.
I might be directing.
Yes.
It's working out who all the personnel is and really thinking through that. Oh, right, we're doing psychiatry, we're thinking about the brain. Do we have projection? Oh, okay, we need a projection designer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What else would, in some projects, it's really thinking through
Sometimes
that.
you also have certain organizations that you might be partnering with. Let's say we're doing a project that has to do with psychiatry in this situation, and maybe we would think about partnering with CAMH or organizations that might be interested in the project, and so it'd be a sort of a beneficial relationship because there's knowledge that these organizations have that would help us as artists.
Yeah.
And so we often think about what are we bringing as artists to these organizations. So there's a sort of two-way system that works with these organizations. So in the Who, you can include organizations that you think would really benefit the project.
And that Who could also include other organizations, like a theater company is already interested in it, and so they've already,
offered rehearsal space
or some. So I think that's a really good point, that the Who doesn't only include the artists, but it could also include organizations. So that's fantastic. What about psychiatrists? Where? Say we're doing this project, we decide we do have a partnership with CAMH. We ask them, which is going to be site specific. It's going to be on the grounds of 1001 Queen Street West. That's a big where, right?
Yeah.
That's that's going to require a lot of logistics. So especially if it's something unusual, it's good to clarify that.
That's right.
I would say if it's more traditional, no, we're going to do it in this theater.
Or we're doing it in a rehearsal hall. Yeah, the where is specific. It also depends on the grant. Like in a development grant, I think you're saying we're going to be in a rehearsal hall.
Yeah.
I think you don't have to give an exact address. I think it's nice if you have those. We'll talk about how later.
Yes.
But the where also situates it in terms of like what is the actual project? Like, is it development and presentation? Is it community work? So you're going, the where then becomes more specific.
If it's community work, are you going out into the community?
Yeah.
Where is it geographically? Is it specifically? Is it specifically, dealing with at Queen and Ossington, or is it a broader conversation? The where speaks a lot to aesthetic as well, and how you envision the piece. If we say we have a 20 cast musical called Psychiatrist, and we say, and we're going to rent this space, and it's this little tiny space, and we're like, it's also about your aesthetics and part of your vision. So it's to think about that really thoroughly, to kind of go, oh, okay, in terms of space, where would it actually fit? I would say when we get into the how part, it's better if things are confirmed or in conversation in terms of aware. That, it's nice to put a wish list out and say, this big musical, we want to put it on this big stage, but but not have any access to it. I want to put it on the Meridian Center. You're like, do you think you can do that?
I mean, great,
fantastic, but you'll have to show me how later, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to articulate something like that. So that's just in terms of the grant. Why?
Why? That's a very important question.
Yeah. And so the why is...
why are we getting together and doing this musical about psychiatry today in Toronto?
Yeah. Why is it important? I think that's really important to TPM, just to get to something specific, but I think it's an important thing to ask yourself as an artist. Why is this a stage piece? Why is it you're doing it this way? Why is this story or this narrative or this piece? Why are you investigating this? I think it's always really important. If they don't ask it explicitly, it is usually what lives in an artist statement or anything like that. And I know people are like, I don't know how to write an artist statement, and they do it exactly like that. But to get to an artist statement, I really think the easiest way is to come back to go, why did you start? What was it that made you start working on this or thinking about this or going, I need to investigate this a little bit more? How else do you find a why?
I think it can be a personal, drive that drives you somewhere, for sure. I don't think it needs to be... I have read grants where they really try to explain the why, and it's not necessary if there's like an impetus, like something drives you towards something.
Yeah.
But it's great if you connect to something personal.
But that's not always the case.
That's not always the case, exactly.
It can be an investigation, like that's in the world,
Yeah, exactly. We're going through this political situation. This is important right now, and I want to talk about that, right? And so that's also a good why, I would say.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a why, then sometimes it feels like the grant maybe misses a drive. Like, what's the drive behind this? Is it a personal drive?
Yeah.
Is it, a political drive? Is it economical?
Yeah.
There's all these different sort of ways you can go about it. But artists usually are driven by something, right? There's something that drives them towards something.
Yes.
And also the why of why these people that came together, why they're coming. Like, what is that sort of main artery that makes, gets the piece going, gets the heart pumping,
So not only why you began investigating that and why, but why are Indrit and I writing a musical? Why is it a musical? Why is it site specific? Like all those questions are important to think about as well. I would say that if you really, really struggle with the why, you ask yourself that question. What is this piece? Like say you want to do this piece written by this old white guy from the 1500s, and you haven't found that reason why. It's like, what? Because you want to be on stage? Because you want to learn to produce? I mean, these are valid reasons. But you have to that the field is crowded. So you have to get funding, to find an audience. In some ways, it has to be more urgent than that.
Totally.
I would say that being populist, being escapist is totally valid reasons. But then you do have to know that and know that you're entering a field both in your audience and in the funding field where there's other things that might feel more urgent.
Right.
So that's a question back to you and back to you as the creator going, okay, why am I doing this, right? Maybe you want to do, you know, a Shakespeare play in your hometown because there's no theater there. This is so urgent, and that's urgent question, right? So that's something you have to examine for yourself, and I think it's really important when you do hit a wall and you don't understand why. You really have to consider. You really have to consider if it's a project you have that has the kind of engine to be able to get you through to funding, get you through to development, get you through to producing. If it doesn't have that drive or that urgency.
Yeah. I mean, what I wanted to add to that is only that the theater that we're making is in conversation with the community, the audience. And so the why, I think, for me is super important. You know, I used to be, you know, when you start out, you're the artist and you're just kind of like, I just want to do work. Like I want to be on stage and I want to do something. And I think that's totally legitimate, you know, absolutely 100%, you know, like you love what you're doing and so you want to be doing it. But then it's like going one step further and investigating, like, what is it about the community that I'm presenting this piece and that, you know, they need to know about this story? Like, why is it important for them, you know? And is there another story that's more important, you know? Like, those are really good questions to ask yourself, you know? Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to how.
Yes, the fun part.
Okay, Indrit loves the
That's
fun
the
part.
fun part. Because the how really, to me, the way I sort of define it is everything that we just talked about is translating it into sort of, you know, money, basically, like numbers and time and logistics, you know?
Yeah.
And that process is a lot of fun for me, but I know a lot of people hate it.
So let's just break that down. So like how, so first you save money, so then that's your budget, right?
That's right.
So budget considerations and just trying to really, you know, I know that can also be intimidating. Get yourself like a YouTube tutorial, general, Excel, just do that and it's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to be able to handle this. And then you really want to sit down, you want to think really thoroughly about everything that you might need and brainstorm that. And might go, well, we need a fire thrower shirt. Okay. Like, you know, so you really want to work that out because that's why Indrit thinks it's fun is because then you can really brainstorm and think about the things that you might need. Yeah. Now you might be applying for a budget. Your budget might be $2 million. You're like, well, that's not going to work. Yeah. And you'll have to draw back, but at least you've done some really thorough thinking around that.
Yeah.
So that's budget. Again, just get yourself a little YouTube tutorial on Excel, and that's going to be enough to carry you through.
Yeah.
And if that feels still really intimidating, you know, you can reach out to people and kind of just go, well, do you have an example of that? Certainly if you're using equity artists, or you can look to unions and associations and see some rates that are standardized, just to kind of figure that out. Okay?
Yeah, and those are questions I think artists in the city, some people know that, and so feel free to ask.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid to ask, like, what's a minimum? Yeah. What's like a good fee for an artist? You know, how much should we pay them?
How much
that
should
kind
I
of
pay
stuff.
the
Those are
intimacy.
And those are good questions to ask because, you know, you want to build a budget that makes sense that, you know, people that are reading it on the other side will know that kind of information. So if I see, you know, a show
something
and
out of whack.
The fee's like $300 per person, I'm going to be like, okay, well, that's really low. Like, how are they going to work over 7 weeks, you know, with $300 a week? Like, that seems not feasible. But so those are good questions to ask in terms of numbers, you know, like specific numbers. And that information is available. You know, it's not hidden or secret, you know, like you're not supposed to know.
Great. That's the budget.
Budget, timeline.
Timeline.
That's always fun.
So that's a real, like, really just, the easiest way to do it is just to work backwards from your production or from your end date or from your workshop date, or just even if it's like something like the Recommenders Grant, we'll talk about that, of how you work out a timeline for yourself. But most times you just try to work backwards to that and just be realistic to it. And that's it. Just gives you thinking about it, going, okay, the grant will come back in maybe 4 months, then it can start then. What does it do? That kind of thing.
It is strange. The timeline can be a little strange when you don't have the money, right? Because you're kind of like, well, I don't have the money. When I have the money, I will figure out like how many, you know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the grant is asking you to figure it out in a way, you know. So doing a little bit of research and like finding out like, is actually the theater available over those dates, you know? because you never know who's sitting in the jury. Like that's really important. There might be like, let's say you're saying I'm going to do it at TPM Backspace over these dates,
and you're like,
and Marjorie's sitting in that jury. She can be like, well, no, they're not because it's booked. You know what I mean? Like so. So it's really important that in a way you do a little bit of research. You don't have to you don't want to spend like a lot of time on it, but just to check. Is this we're gonna book a rehearsal space, and we were thinking of these spaces possibly, and then building a timeline from that.
A how is about feasibility. A how is about demonstrating to the jury that you've thought through some of the details and you've maybe perhaps begun some of the research. And the further along the path you are in that research and the more detail that you've done, the better that it looks to a jury because it looks more feasible. So it looks like you've done the work to be able to actually pull this thing off, your crazy psychiatry project. Right?
Which we will be doing,
okay,
right?
I guess.
After this.
So other than the how, timelines, that's a schedule.
How can also be process.
Yes.
Like, are you... like in our
is it improvised?
Fun, is it improvised?
Are we using community members and working
right.
with them and engaging with them in a different way to create this piece? Are we using archival material from when when CAMH first started?
Yes. Are we using the grid as a sort of way to like generate material? Are we, like you and I are sitting down and writing but then we're calling Fatuma, and Fatuma's going to put it in music. Fatuma can do actually because she's actually really talented. So you know what I mean? Like what is the process in which you will be making this thing happen?
Yeah, and again, how feasible is that? It's like I'm going to have all these horses that come in.
What does feasible mean?
Feasible means whether it seems realistic or not, right? And whether you really have thought through things where from the outside someone says, "Oh yeah, I believe they can do that." Yeah. I think you want to give people the confidence that you can do it and that you can pull it off. Every project, no matter big small, it's a crazy thing because theater's crazy. So you have to give people that confidence.
That's right.
I just want to talk about the people on the other side who are the people reading these applications and stuff. So for the most part, your piece, your project will be amongst many others. And that's true for most grants. And as the funding pots get leaner and leaner, those numbers will actually grow. We'll see more and more people applying to the same grants. So knowing that, I want everyone to know that everyone around the table reading those grants, I know it's hard to believe, they're on your side. That's really true. They're looking for the best thing. They're trying to have the best, most optimistic take of what you give them. So the more specific, the more detailed you can give them, the more confidence they can have. All of these grants currently at all levels, at TEC, OAC, Canada Council, as well as all of those are still peer reviewed. And what that means is they grab people from the community. So if it's an indie grant, it'll be more independent. If you're applying for a larger grant, they'll have experience to that effect. They're your peers. And for the most part, everyone has responsibility. Once they've agreed to adjudicate that kind of grant, they've agreed to a kind of impartiality. They've agreed to a rigorous process. And they've agreed to really just identify what's in the grant itself. Not hearsay, not prejudice. And so that's
somebody said about them.
Yes. So everyone's trying to agree to a process that's fair and equitable because their projects also go through the same process. So they're also trying to bring that when they come to the table. Okay. All that to say is if someone's reading, like I've done a grant with 90 applications or something. So that's a lot of reading. I can take notes, but there's a certain point where you really have to capture people's imagination and capture their confidence. It's not just imagination, it's their confidence in the project. Something might aesthetically be completely opposite of what I like in theater, but if I have the confidence and I believe it to be a quality project, I will still score it highly, even though I wouldn't see that theater or I wouldn't create that myself. Right. Because that's the rigor that comes through that process. So you have to, I know it's hard to believe, but people are on your side. So here's how you can help them be more on your side. if they've articulated a minimum font, please do not go below that. I know it's so tempting to squeeze in more by changing the font or something. Most of the stuff is online now.
Yes.
So I don't know what I'm saying. But anyway.
Well, yeah, there's no more font size. But there is like a number of characters or a number of words.
They've given that to you for a reason. And that's to just help you be more succinct. And you're like, oh, but if I had more words, I could say this. Okay, but go back and see if there's a clearer way that you can say what you're trying to say. Okay? Yeah. And to that end, I would also say, because you're reading so many grants, people kind of get into an attitude of like, oh, it has to be in grant speak. I'll tell you, being sincere and just telling the story and using the language that you want to use is the clearest way to communicate your project to a peer. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to squeeze in buzzwords, if you're trying to like use language that isn't authentic to your project or authentic to you, we can tell, like we can smell it. Like you're just like, something is inauthentic about this piece. And as soon as there's a little bit of doubt, that can multiply. And so that's a tricky thing. So you just, the real thing is if you can be sincere and talk about your project authentically, that's the best way to communicate your project.
100%. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like the use of different adverbs, like, oh, it's going to be an amazing project, and things like that, or
which is too general.
It's
right?
Yeah, like that's too general. But like what I often say is, just tell us about the project and let us decide whether it's amazing or not. In a way, you know what I mean? It's like if the project's amazing, it's gonna read off of the grant. You know, I'm doing this. I'm meeting this person. We're going to this community center. We're going with this artist. Like right away, I'm like, this is amazing. You know, as opposed to you stating something like that. When I notice all those kinds of adverbs in the grant is when I kind of go, I'm not sure that they're that confident in what they're doing. I think they're trying to sort of hamp it up a little bit, you know. No, ham it up. Hamp it up is not an expression.
Hamp it up.
Hamp it up.
Hamp it up.
What's hamp it up?
Hype it up. You're
hype
saying.
It up. Hype it up or ham it up.
Hamp it up. Hamp it up.
Anyway.
Ramp it up. Anyway.
Sure.
Doesn't matter.
But
don't
anyway,
do it.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Let's move.
Should we move forward?
We're going to move forward. What's our timeline?
We're at 27.
27. Oh my God, already?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
11:27.
11:27.
Okay, we'll do this very quickly. So I think what we've talked through, just to give you an example of working through the actual recommenders grant from OAC. So I'm just looking down just on the page. So there's a number of people still available that you can apply to. They all have different criteria and different priorities. So really fit yourself into how you want to fit into that in that respect. So there's tons left, like Aluna, like Buddies, like Cahoots, like us. December 2nd, please. Lots left. So have a look at that. Some of that's geographic, so you can't do anything about that. You don't live near there, so they're prioritizing those people as they should. I'm just looking through this. The first kind of things is just details. Again, those are just some of the details of working through it. The minimum grant is $1,000, and the maximum grant is $5,000.
How does that work here?
How does it work here? I would say that in truth, it's very rare for people to get $5,000 because theater's allocations are much less than what you think they are. Our allocation is $16,000. So if everyone asked for $5,000 and we gave out $5,000, you can do the math. That's 3 people. So that's just philosophically, I think we lean more that we want to support more people at kind of a medium level than support fewer people. So just in respect to that. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing I would also say is that if you apply for $1,000, but I love your project, I still can only give you $1,000. So
that's right.
Just that's a bit of a balance. I would say we sit somewhere in between. Sometimes if you're an emerging artist, we might give you $1,000, or we don't know what the project is, but it's worth it to see how far it'll get. But $1,000's not a lot. $1,000's maybe a week off work, or a week and a half off work, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
So to work on it, so it's not a lot, right? So those are the amounts. The first, I think I've mixed up the pages. The first real thing is accessibility fund. The accessibility fund is available to you if you apply for it and you're eligible for it. So you should just check that out and check out with your OAC officer regarding that. Artistic merit. So artistic merit we know is the what and the why, and potentially some of the how, some of the process. What they call it is, what are you planning to do? What do you want to achieve? Tell us about your work and the history. That part of that is who. I think that's pretty clear in that respect. Those are the who and the why and the what. And then the support material. Let's talk about support material.
I mean, I'm not sure what... for this grant specifically, I think you need files, like script?
Or like project something, yeah.
Is there a minimum in terms of how many
I think there's like one each, or it's on the OAC site, and we also accept some audio or video if your project is interesting. Yeah.
And also, what's the situation if you have ASL interpretation?
Yeah.
Can you just submit the video?
Yeah. So then they can submit it in the support material part, but they have to make a note of it, and they do have to contact the officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, the way I see the support material is that you really have to think about what is it that you want to submit. That it's very important that us in this case has some context around what they're doing. So it could be as specific and literal as like, this is the script that we're going to work on, which is totally legit. But often, especially these grants are, for a new idea, something that's like, hasn't really quite materialized.
Yeah.
And so I think it's great to think about either previous scripts, so we get a sense, especially if Marjorie or myself or the institution that you're applying to is not familiar with your work, just to get a sense of like your style, your writing style. And if it's not work that's text driven, like a lot of my work is not text driven, I often submit videos around what kind of aesthetic I'm working in, what kind of, like how am I envisioning it in terms of the disciplines, like I work a lot with movement, and so I show the movement. So it's like, here's a little excerpt. So think really sort of, try to find something. And if you don't have something like that, which is totally cool, try to find, I would say like what I did initially
production photos from past things.
Yes, that's great. Those are totally cool. But also what I did is I asked a couple of friends, I brought my camera, and I just, I had some natural lights and an iPhone, because the iPhones now are so high tech. And you just ask if your friends are okay with that, and tape a little bit of, let's say, your process or choreography that you think you might be exploring, you know what I mean? And that shouldn't take too long, and it shouldn't be too arduous in terms of editing or putting together. And I think it really helps on this side, especially if we're not familiar, to kind of go, oh, that's their style, that's how they work, you know? So anyway, I'm specifically talking about work that's not text-based. Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say is, like, be very judicious about what you're giving us. Like, don't give us the whole hour session of where you were figuring that out, but see if you can find that little 2 minutes that really is clear about it. And it doesn't take a lot of editing, just like being able to capture that. Most computers, most phones can have that capacity. And as well, I would say if there is sound involved with it, see if you can get a little higher level sound, or that make sure, because the other part of it is that these things are being broadcast when they're seen. I don't think people realize that a lot of times some of this material, the support material that's AV, is not seen until everyone meets in the room. So I might have read your application 3 weeks ago and then look at your video once everyone's in the meeting room. So you also know that sometimes that's being broadcast. And so a higher quality sound, if sound is really important, is critical. So if it's music or we have to hear the text really clearly, then I would just say, just see if you can do a little bit higher quality sound. Because if the visual quality is not good and the sound quality is not good, you're better off sending pictures.
Yeah.
Okay?
If the pictures are better quality.
If the pictures are better quality,
Ooh, our lighting is shifting. We're getting a little darker now. And we move on to the next part of this.
Here's a little small thing that I don't think people realize. Oh, CV, I think that's fairly obvious. Here's one little part of the grant that I don't think people realize. Because there's a third party, we're a third party, we're just making recommendations for these recommender grants. In terms of privacy, you're technically applying to the Ontario Arts Council. It means that we don't really have access to your personal information, your contact information, unless you decide to give it to us. And there's a spot on the form in the declaration section, which is near the end of the grant, that says, if you want the recommender to have your contact information, provide it below. And that's where you need to provide it. If you do not give that consent, we cannot contact you. I mean, I can probably find you, but we can't contact you. And I think it's really important because I have to say, having done these grants, having been like managing some of these grants for organizations since 2007, one thing that happens is that because we have a limited pool of money, once that limited pool of money is finished, there might be other projects that we didn't quite feel could be funded yet, but we might want to support in another way.
That's
so
right.
We might be able to give rehearsal space. We might be able to go, well, let's give you, let's talk with you and just give you a dramaturgical session just to get you through that. Or we might want to say, you know what? 2 of you artists are working on the same thing and you need to collaborate. You guys should talk to each other. Or like, for example, at a different theater company that I worked for, someone had applied to the Recommenders Grant. It didn't quite make the line and we didn't fund it, but we said, will you join our unit and work on this play in the unit? So she did. Eventually, over 2 years, they developed that play. It was produced, and it just recently won the Governor General's Award. Yay! So you just have...
It's all possible.
It's all possible.
Yeah.
But we can't do that if we can't contact you. So that's just my own little thing.
Yeah,
and that's something that we've run into. Someone didn't give their contact information, but we were like, oh, but we want to hire them as an actor.
Yeah, and it seems, I mean, to me, it's like you're applying for this grant, especially with creators, recommenders grants.
Yes.
I keep calling them creators reserve. Recommenders grants. You're applying, and you want to form a relationship with these companies that you're applying to,
Yes.
and so this is an opportunity to actually do that. You know?
Yes.
So I don't like. I would be the first one to put.
Yeah.
My name.
Be like, yes, I want you to know
Please
me.
contact me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to change it up a little bit.
Woo! Do we have a musical number?
We don't.
Not this time.
Not this time.
Next year.
Next year we'll have jingles and things. We're going to invite Fatuma in front of the camera. And we're just going to ask her a few questions. Okay. I don't know if we're in the frame. Yeah.
I think.
Andrew, you want to double check?
I can double check from here. I can see from here.
Okay, good. Don't take down the...
Don't take
Okay.
out drop.
This is Fatuma.
Hello. I was behind the camera the whole time.
I think we just want to check in because, like, one of the things is that you're an artist, you've been successful in grants. What are some tips that you would give? What's the first tip you would give?
First tip.
Yeah.
I was making notes because everything you were saying was super genius.
Okay,
and I want to use it for the next time I apply for grants. But I think that the thing that I first learned was the whole, it doesn't have to be a thesis. Like, you don't have to try to sound over analytical, and they do kind of want you moving with your heart first.
Yes.
Particularly, like, knowing what your strengths are is very important. I think that trying to sound exactly like what the theater company is looking for will not do you a service, versus trying to focus on that why and figure out what it is that inspired you to create that, and kind of like adding on to that, if you know, like, admin is not your greatest thing, if you're like, this has a form, this is so like rigid, and I'm not this kind of person, I'm an expressionist, I don't know how to put my work into words. Find people in your circle who are those people, and like sit down, grab a coffee, and then have them sort of figure out. Like, I had a friend who I met through another workshop, and I told her, I was like, I have this like musical that I'm interested in. It's not psychiatrist.
Oh no!
It's not psychiatrist. And I was just like, do you want to like maybe like sit down? You can like listen to some of my songs, and like maybe like help me with these grants. And then we sat down and we applied for like the next coming grants in the next few years, and we got most of what we asked for.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because she had the mindset that I knew I was lacking.
Right.
And it's like knowing what you're good at. Like I knew the creative, like I knew how to speak with my heart. She knew how to speak for the money. And finding the people who sort of balance you out.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So great. So she
Yeah.
helped like articulate thoughts better. and, like,
Exactly.
clearer.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna call Lucy McPhee. You killed
Yes,
it.
Lucy.
You did that.
I think that's a really good tip, though. Like even like just
That's
to
great.
talk aloud your grant or your idea to even as a friend, just to bounce that off someone. You're forced to articulate. If you can say it, eventually you'll be able to write it down.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you can kind of go, if you're kind of going like, but I think it's because the patient, it's like you haven't worked it out yet, so you need to work it out. And sometimes that does mean talking it aloud.
Specifically, if it's peer reviewed, like
Yes.
that was another thing that blew my mind. I thought I was kind of like speaking to like the ethos of like people,
Yeah.
Like
robots,
power, you know?
robots who just like heard keywords and were like, this deserves something,
Yes.
Yeah.
as opposed to people who are like in your community, who don't want to hear you sound rigid or like try to market CEO your stuff. They just want to hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not pitching, like, it's not a pitch to, like, it's not like a, you know, when people talk about the elevator pitch.
Yeah,
it's not, you're not pitching
this
to a
isn't Silicon
CEO.
Valley.
Exactly,
This is not.
exactly. Like, you are talking
So
to
my joke about the elevator pitch, it's not a joke, but someone at an event asked me, so what's your elevator pitch for Theatre Press Marai? And I said, we need an elevator in our space. I need $1 million. But they didn't laugh.
No, that's good.
Well, that's a real pitch. I really
I need an elevator and $1 million.
Yeah.
Any other tips that you might have?
I think that the kind of like the final button for me would have been it's hard to ask for money.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like a big thing that artists kind of need to like
Do you mean like
bridge
for
the
a
gap.
project or for
Just
yourself?
genuinely for
Gotcha.
yourself, because a lot of communities we come from like this
Okay.
weird like don't pay us for art, this is something that we're doing for fun. Like it's a really hard mindset
Gotcha.
to kind of overcome. And I think it's one thing to like learn that you're not just doing this for yourself. In fact, that like if you didn't have stories, we would have nothing to put on our stages, and that this is like a kind of an important thing for you to kind of know that it's not just something that will impact you writing or creating. It's something that will impact many people who get to see the thing that you make.
Correct.
But also it's like it's I think it did a lot for me to sit down and be like, I am worth it. I need to put down, like, people need to see this. And even if it's something that will live beyond whether you get the grant or not. It's like learning to say, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing
That's
and beautiful,
incredible.
so empowering. And it's like kind of like that's also a way to get over the detail and the forms. It's like all they're asking of me is to fill out this form, and then they're going to give me money. So it's like, can I do this? I can fill out the form. I can fill it out.
Yeah.
Nobody can give you money if you don't fill out the form.
That's it.
It's the basic line.
Yeah.
Any other question for Fatuma?
No, but I have general questions.
Oh, okay, let's go back and we'll
are
do
we
some
asking-
TPM specific things.
Okay.
I'm like, should
Okay.
I go back behind the camera?
Thank you.
Next segment. This
I'm sorry, we just change it up a
is
bit.
really elaborate this year, I gotta say.
So we want to talk a little bit more about specific things. Are we getting any questions coming in?
No, just a lot of love. A lot
Okay,
of
great.
praise and love.
Oh,
Yeah.
So much love back.
I don't know what this is.
That's your way of saying love.
It's like it's the face that's like happy and then has
Has
it's
the
the
hands
emoticon.
out?
Yeah, has the
Yeah.
hands out. That's what I'm doing.
Cute.
Okay, so I want to talk specifically about TPM. So if you go to our website, we do have that's under artist engagement. That's under the Contact Us tab. There is a little section that has recommender grants, and if you click through, there is a PDF, or if you need a Word document emailed to you, you can click there as well, and we'll email that to you. It just has a little more information. So this information is also on the OAC. Do you want to read our priorities? Our priorities for this round?
Are artists of color, indigenous artists, deaf artists, artists with disabilities, and queer artists, which includes trans, gender nonconforming, and gender non-binary. And then artists who are creating with alternative points of view or processes. So all of the ones that I just outlined.
So I just want to bring this up. I also want to share with you that part of this is that it's really important when you kind of navigate, you're starting out and you're like connecting with theater companies, that you're kind of honing in on companies that speak to you. All the companies do different things and have different approaches. And if you investigate their websites and things like that, you're going to find out more. If you kind of go to their shows or you figure out what shows were produced there before, you kind of figure out the aesthetic and the engine that drives these theaters. And so I just wanted to, before we get into a little bit of conversation about why our priorities are there, this is, you can look on our website and you can find this. And this is it's under mandate and vision, under About Us. And there's a belief, there's a vision, there's mission, there's mandate, and there's also our values. I think the most succinct part of that is our mission. And the mission is, our mission at Theatre Passe Muraille is to break down walls by pushing against boundaries, to create art with and for an audience, examining the marginal, the unexplored, and the unforeseen, to articulate a distinct Canadian voice that reflects the complexity of our intercultural society. That's a lot of words. For me, what does that say to you, those words?
To me, it talks about the Canadian identity as TPM sees it, which is that it is intercultural, or so it's not that it's just multicultural, it's intercultural, that cultures are sort of fusing and interacting and communicating with each other, while at the same time holding their own identity is the way I sort of it translates to me. And also that we are interested in examining artists that have in the past, or stories that have in the past possibly been not noticed or not given any opportunity or space or a spotlight. That while that's happened, that at the same time are in communication with the reality of what we feel is Canadian, to be Canadian, or Canadian identity.
And I think to just answer that, it's allowing a larger space for stories that just aren't necessarily told or in the mainstream, and that you can see in the reflection of our programming. Even this season, we have a piece coming up that's 2 plays coming up that's will be performed in Arabic. We have Polyqueer Love Ballad coming up, which is about a polyamorous individual and a queer individual, and kind of how they work that out. So there's a lot of things that maybe are not necessarily seen on theater stages, and so that's where we sit in respect to what we're interested in terms of art. The second part of that kind of our priorities, which is creating with alternative points of view or processes. And so the processes part is the other part of that. It's where you might find, if you have a different way of getting into your play, if you don't sit down and write, but you may be interested in exploring working with a hula hoop and a clown. I don't know what that piece is, but anyway, if you have a different kind of avenue to kind of break through your artistic questioning. That's right. And so that's also interesting to us.
Or if you work over, very small, short periods of time, over a long period of time, as opposed to you do a 2-week rehearsal, which is a more, you would say, traditional way of working, I guess.
Yeah.
But, alternative points of sort of making work.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to read these priorities again. Artists of color, Indigenous artists, deaf artists, artists with disabilities, and queer artists, which includes trans, gender nonconforming, and gender non-binary. Now, I'm going to ask this question. If I say those priorities and you feel not included in those priorities, I want you to ask yourself, 1, why you don't feel included. I want you to ask yourself if you've looked at our mandate, if you look through kind of TPM's programming and our future programming, and ask yourself what you should do in that instance. I think it's an uncomfortable conversation. There is a segment of society that is not included in these priorities. And we're an inclusive theater, but we do have to have priorities. And the reason we have priorities is because if you don't feel included here, it's because we're trying to address historical inequities in terms of what is on stage, in terms of the artists that we support. And I know that can be difficult. That can be difficult as an artist going, but my work is important. I'm important. I believe that. Yeah. And I believe in you.
And these priorities don't say that work is not important or necessary, but the priorities that have been outlined are important to us at TPM right now.
Yeah.
We feel that these artists and maybe these stories have not had as much opportunity to be on stage. It does not take away from the importance of everybody's story. Absolutely, 100%. But maybe there's other avenues that are available to you that maybe TPM cannot accommodate right now. You know?
And we might not be the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself if you send us an application anyway because you think there's a way that you are included in that, then I would say that's part of the why. And make sure you articulate that, and articulating why you want to be at TPM, why you feel like this company is a fit for the kind of work that you're doing. Yeah?
No, that's great.
Great. Good. The slightly uncomfortable part. Just to let you know, in terms of this particular, just in broad strokes, in terms of, we have 2 avenues in which kind of projects or scripts that come through us that are open. So here's the recommender grants, and that's till our deadline is December 2nd. You will hear back from us in the middle of January. Not from us, from OAC in the middle of January. So that's open. Another process
and it's important for people to know that Marjorie reads every single one of the recommenders grants that come in. So like Marjorie reads them first. So if you want to get your work read by Marjorie, this is an amazing opportunity to just get your script in there, you know?
Yeah. And then the second opportunity will come in the spring, and we'll work out those details, but that's Meet Marjorie, and that's a person, that's by application, so anyone can apply for that. There are no restrictions. You will be applying for a 10-minute meeting with me, and you can do anything in that 10 minutes, and we'll kind of talk about that. So look out for that. That process will be completely open, and we'll do a couple of days of those 10-minute meetings, and we'll work through that. But that won't come until spring. In terms of just seeing where that process is, this is the entry point. This is a huge entry point for getting on my radar, for being considered for curation, for being considered for workshop development, to be considered to include as a resident artist perhaps, or as a buzz development artist, all of these things. And from all of this milieu, do things get programmed into a season? Yep. People ask, how does a season get together? How does that happen? It's like, well, it's like chess. It's like Sudoku. It's like TPM on average probably has between 7 to 9 shows per season. It's a mix of things. It's a mix of things that we produce outright. It's a mix of things that we co-produce and things that we present. And so shows that are already made and we bring in. For all of those, it's really critical that we think about what accessibility initiatives we do as a part of those projects, including the ones that we present, just so you know. So if you're already thinking about these things or thinking about accessibility inside of your project, please let us know in your grant, in your recommender grant, because we're definitely interested in supporting that. And so it's good for us to know where you're thinking aesthetically in terms of that, of how you might include deaf individuals from your piece, right? Or how you might include blind audience members from your piece that's mostly visual, that kind of thing. Okay? So I hope that answers that question a little bit. What's our time like?
We've got 6 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
6 minutes.
So I think we should answer. Are there any questions?
Just so much love. Everybody's saying it's very helpful. They're hoping to post this video after we're done.
It will live.
It will live. Patricia says, "Hamp it up."
Hamp it.
Hamp it. Yeah. Watch, we're going to start a new generation of artists who are going to start saying hamp it up.
Hamp it up.
So good. No
I
questions.
have questions.
Great.
Well,
These are good
I
questions.
prepared some questions.
Yes, prepared questions.
Who reads the grant at TPM?
So we're still working that. So I've made it so that anyone who wants to be involved in that process in our theater company can be involved in that process at any point that they want to be involved. I will read all of them as Indrit has suggested. Indrit will also read the short list. So that's what we know for sure. There may be other people. We may be able to pull together a bit of a committee, which may include a board member, which may include. So it's a more collaborative conversation when it actually comes to what we do, what we may recommend. And our managing director, Regine Cadet, at the very end will also be a part of the conversation of the funding as well. Yeah. Great. So that the reason for that is because we can say we can give only 1,000 to that person, but next year maybe we can give them more money and they can come do a buzz and they'll be great.
Yeah.
So that's part of a larger question and larger ecology of what the theater is able to support.
Should I feel discouraged if I'm unsuccessful?
This is such a good question. It's really hard when you get that grant back and you're so sure. I know a project...
Especially if you've applied to 10. And you get 10
I've been rejected to 10.
Yeah.
I've rejected more than 10. But yeah, like when you get those 10, like everybody knows getting those no's is not a nice thing.
I did a project and I applied for 9 different grants. And it was like, I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
And literally, when it came in, I had to go and cry because I was like, I cannot believe it. I cannot. And that was an organizational grant, but I couldn't believe that no one could see the value of it. And it's so hard. Number one, as we articulated before, even if you don't get a grant or recommended for a grant with us, it may be a better fit with another theater company. So that might tell you where it might be a good place in terms of development in any case, like in terms of like it's a better fit for a different theater company in any case.
Yeah.
But it also comes on our radar, as we've said. So we're like, oh, okay, maybe not this time, but maybe when it's a little further along. Or maybe we can offer you space, or maybe we're interested in this aspect of it and want to talk to you more about it.
Or interested in you as an artist.
Or interested in you, or maybe not the project. So there's a lot of benefit to even applying, just so you know that. I think there is learning involved. I've written grants and I've gone, oh, you know what? I've read it after I submitted and I thought, I sound very negative in it. Or maybe I didn't articulate that. It was so clear to me because I've lived with it for 2 years, but now I realize it's not as clear as I thought. So there's learning that comes from being turned down as well. So take that, and that's a hard one. You're like, oh, okay. It hurts. But you just have to keep going. And we've said we've had things that have been 10 times we've applied to things and not gotten it. Right. So I don't know what that threshold is where at some point you go, well, maybe it's not a good grant. I mean, it's a really good time if you're consistently being turned down is to make sure you're showing it to other people. You're showing it to other artists or you're showing to other people, in the community to get some feedback on it because it might be just one little way that you're articulating working in a community or one little way that something that could you just be shifted and make you successful the next time. So it's important to share that especially as part of your learning to go, okay, I think I'm being turned down because of this. I don't know what that threshold is of what point do you just go, maybe it's not a good project. I don't know where that point is. I don't, again, I've been, we've done grants where we, put out 10 grants, and been denied 10 times. So, but at some point, sometimes that's why it's important for other people to look at it who can be critical and kind of say, you know what, it's just ill-conceived or it's actually not that interesting or someone else has already done this and it seems very similar, so they can give you advice as to maybe how to be successful in the grant.
And also it's important to know that there are some really good grants that don't get funding because simply the pot of money runs out. That's also, unfortunately, that's also a reality in Canada today. So, you could have written an amazing grant and just, there's other amazing grants there. And so for some reason, this didn't seem like as much of a priority as maybe the other ones. So don't feel discouraged. This is a good question, can people ask for feedback with this grant, specifically recommenders grant?
I think it's pretty tricky for us just because the volume of people that we get. We recommend that you do kind of give us permission to contact you with your email. Maybe there's other initiatives that we can work on, things like that. But I would say it's a tricky one for us. We'll take it case by case.
Yes, but other grants you can, generally speaking, especially
Yes.
at the council levels,
Yes.
you can, generally speaking, ask for some feedback from the jury,
Yeah.
and it gives you an idea of what the jury was
Yeah.
maybe struggling with. Or sometimes, I've gotten feedback that's like, the jury loved it. This is a great project. We just ran out of money, and I think that's a legitimate, don't feel, in other words, don't feel discouraged, just keep working. That's the worst.
That's the worst when they say, they loved it. It's an amazing project. You
But
were
no
this
money.
close. You're just like, what am I supposed to do with that?
You're
I
like,
like
I
it
still
when
don't
they
have the
say,
money.
I like when they say, yeah, they didn't like this part. I'm like, okay, fair. That is what it is. Like,
Because they can change it,
But I was like, oh, it was great. They loved it. We don't have any negative feedback. There just wasn't enough money. It's the worst.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
But it's...
But I think, to Indrit's point, try not to be discouraged and try to go back to why you were inspired in the first place.
Yeah.
Go back and try again. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. But try not to be discouraged.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think we're done
right
with time.
on
Are we
time.
over time?
We're right
We're over
on time.
We're right on time. Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you
was
so
fun.
much. Our deadline is December 2nd, 1 p.m. on OAC. There's portal things. You need to ask them. We don't know. We don't have anything to do with that. We just get them on the other end. You will hear back. They'll be in mid-January, and you'll hear back on the system. We're looking forward to reading all the things.
Yes, so excited.
Yay.
Before we go,
Yes.
we have a show coming up.
Yes.
Polyqueer Love Ballad is from November 26th to December 1st.
1 week only. Artists from
Yes.
Vancouver.
Very
Please come
exciting
check it out.
piece.
Yeah.
Come check it out.
A musical.
A musical.
Yeah.
No psychiatrist in it.
No psychiatrist. Yes.
So, but please come check that out. And
Say hi if you see us.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.